Welcome to another episode of Unlock Your Child's Full Potential, where we're all about creating lasting connections with our children. I'm your host, Billy, and today we're asking the following question. What if, instead of seeing social media comparisons as harmful, we could use them to help our kids build stronger, more meaningful connections? In this episode, we dive into this transformative idea with Shari Leid, a friendship expert and life coach who has dedicated her career to helping people foster genuine relationships. Shari tackles the pressing challenges parents face in today's digital age, where social media often leads to feelings of inadequacy and loneliness in children. She offers a fresh perspective. Rather than strictly limiting screen time, we can encourage positive comparisons that foster empathy and self-worth. Shari shares actionable strategies like engaging in volunteer work and embracing diverse cultures to shift our kids' focus from unrealistic online standards to their own strengths and community bonds. Throughout this conversation, you'll discover how to balance social comparisons to boost your child's self-esteem, support their unique strengths, and maintain open communication about social media use and cyberbullying. Shari also provides invaluable tips for helping introverted children make friends and navigate the evolving nature of friendships. Tune in to learn how to turn the potential pitfalls of social media into powerful tools for personal growth and connection. Hi, Shari. Welcome to the show. Today, we're diving into the challenges parents face in guiding their kids through the social media jungle while empowering them to thrive with confidence and steer clear of loneliness and depression. That's such an important topic.
It is. And my children now are almost, actually, my daughter turns 24 this week and my son is 22. So I'm from that first generation of parents that raised teenagers through the social media era. And now all of you are doing it from when they're really young.
Yeah, and it's so hard. And I've come across several studies linking social media to negative mental health outcomes, especially among young kids. And factors like cyberbullying, comparing oneself to others, and exposure to unrealistic body images and standards can really take a toll. But you're suggesting using comparisons as a tool to combat loneliness and feelings of inadequacy. How does that work exactly?
Yes, well, comparisons just in general, just even taking it outside the social media realm, and I'll jump right back into social media because that's our topic, but even just taking it out of the social media realm, it's natural for us as humans to compare ourselves to other people. And you go way back, and a lot of that comes from survival, right? You need to know where you stand in a community. You look at other people to see how they're surviving, what tools they're using to get that food for their family or whatever it is. So comparison is something that's innate to who we are as human beings. So comparisons are going to happen. It's a survival mechanism. Now we jump forward to today, and comparisons take a different form in our younger generation. I mean, they're still doing that to learn how to survive and how to live. But also, as you mentioned, this social media, we see these perfect body images, people who appear happy. You can tell when your friends are invited to things and you are not. So understanding, I think the first step, that comparisons are going to happen. No matter what, parents, you're not going to be able to fight comparisons. And by telling your kids, don't compare yourself to that other person or that teen idol, unfortunately, that alone will not work. So let's just assume comparisons are going to happen. What we can do is use comparisons as a tool and guide our kids to, look at, for instance, if let's just say they're Swifties and they love Taylor Swift or some role model like that. We guide them to ideas that, well, look at them. What makes them unique? Did you notice that when she embraced her uniqueness, that's when the world opened up to her, or whoever it is, right? And when you start using comparisons to show kids, and you could use it in different ways, but let's just first start with a foundation. I think it's very important that the foundation for happiness, for talking about combating loneliness, is finding self-worth. And to find self-worth, which is defined as, what you believe, what you are inside, has nothing to do with what you've done, your accomplishments, what you've acquired, or even what you've lost. It's who you are inside. And we start by talking about our children's uniqueness. And I like to remind, kids and adults that the word weird, W-I-E-R-D, the root is weird, W-Y-R-D, which is an Old English word. And that root means destiny or fate, destiny and fate.
Oh, I
So
love that.
yeah, it becomes powerful, right? When your kid feels different or like they don't fit in. When you talk about this in a powerful way, as opposed to trying to bring somebody up to par, that weird means destiny and fate. And then again, you're looking at those pop idols or whoever your child might be admiring. And I guarantee you, you look at anybody that's really popular or a big leader, they're weird. There's something very unique about them, right? That makes them stand out, whether you like them or not. There's something very unique and weird about that person, but they've embraced it. And that's when they've embraced it, the world's opened up to them. So I think the foundation for comparisons, as we're teaching healthy comparisons to our children, is to help them establish that self-worth. That's something that no one can take from them. And if we're going to use comparisons, let's talk about being weird. And hey, what makes you weird? And if you don't like the word weird, or if your child doesn't like it, use the word unique. What makes you unique? How are you different than that person? There's a comparison. How are you different than this other person? You might be looking at one person, but there's billions of people out there. Let's talk about you and use comparisons as a foundation for self-worth in that way.
That's a great way to put it. When I heard comparisons, healthy comparisons, I thought of using someone's achievements to inspire you to become more, but that could backfire because you could feel bad that you're not there yet, that they might be the same age as you are, and you're nowhere near that. So uniqueness is a nice way to put it. I love it.
And we are in a unique place as parents because our kids are savvy. Our kids are smart. They know what areas they're falling short in. They know when other people are doing better. We can motivate them, but trust me, us pointing that out to them that they haven't achieved this certain level that someone else has. They've already heard that from their teachers. They've seen where they rank in their classrooms. Especially, what really surprised me as a parent is how socially in a classroom, math at a very young age starts to define kids as if they're smart or not smart, as opposed to, whether they're creative or they could think of the best stories or anything like that. Math, for some reason, seems to, and maybe because you could see it and you could see scores and the kids are good math kids. And so from a very young age, our kids start ranking themselves as smart or not smart based on basically kind of this one subject very early on. And everything else, they already know when they're falling short or they're not doing as well. So as parents, we're in a unique place to be able to balance those comparisons that they see with helping them compare their, when we talk about their strengths, as parents, it's natural for us to want to get our kids on par. And so we focus on the weaknesses because we want them to succeed, or at least what we think success looks like. And when we do that, a lot of times their strengths get ignored and they're not celebrated. And that chips away at their self-worth because what they're good at all of a sudden isn't worth anything and it gets no attention. So, if we want to use comparisons, we could joke with them, it's just our kids. We keep this inside and we tell them, so glad you weren't Julie or whatever that didn't sing as well as you. You really carry a good tune or, whatever it is. But using those comparisons kind of as a fun way to show them, man, this is where you really shine. And wow, this comes easy for you because you're just naturally good at this.
I've always shied away from comparisons, especially between the siblings,
Oh, yeah.
because it's a little bit trickier there. Could you share your own experience with your child? Like, how did you use that approach?
It's very interesting because my children are very different from one another. In fact, and in addition to that, my daughter's adopted and my son is a naturally born son. So there's a lot of differences there, and they're very different in the way they do school and all of that. So for them, what we did is we actually separated them into different schools because of those comparison issues. But I had the privilege last year of traveling to all 50 states in the US and meeting with strangers, women that I didn't know, to share meals with. And one of the questions I would ask is about their family. And many of them came from large families, some of them who were really close to their siblings. For me, I grew up as an only child. I'm really curious, what made you close? How did your parents do that? Because there are siblings that aren't close. Is there a magic thing?
I would
Say that.
love to know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And especially, in families where they have the sibling who's really great in school or really athletic, and the other one who, stumbled a lot and wasn't as athletic or great. When I asked about comparisons, they didn't remember their parents comparing themselves to each other, and so they didn't really have an answer for that, which tells me maybe it didn't happen. But what they said is that their parents just treated us kind of all the same, and they just celebrated what we did really well. And so it sounded to me as if the parents, they recognized their kids as individuals, and they didn't downplay any child to make the other child feel better. And they celebrated every win. And that's tricky if you have one kid too that struggles versus the other kids and doesn't seem to have those wins. What I would say to that is you see what you're looking for.
Oh, that's
And
so true.
yeah. And so when we redefine, a lot of times as a parent, I used to get angst. And to be fully transparent, my daughter is neurodivergent. So her experience is very different than my son, who school was kind of designed for his type of brain. And so my fear, and anytime I get angst, it was because I thought, oh, if she didn't do this at this time period, or she didn't, like, let's just say drive or whatever it is, what is her life going to look like? I had this preconceived idea of what is safe, what is success, what a pathway should look like. And that's when I would have the angst, feeling like I was a failure as a parent, and unrealistic expectations. And at one point, I realized this is her journey. And her journey looks very different than mine. And it's probably even more beautiful because it's so unique and different. And she's creative and crafty and figures things out in such a different way. And when I start to look at it that way, and it's this idea that you see what you're looking for, and got out of my own idea of this perfect roadmap I planned, that we all plan before we actually have kids, when I start to look at it that way and you see what you're looking for, all of a sudden it's like, wow, you thought of that? That's amazing. How did you do that? Where did that come from? You start to see those amazing moments in every kid. So the balance starts to happen. It doesn't seem so different in balance. And in fact, in those moments, you're also teaching your other children to look at other people around them and see the beauty that they bring, which I think makes our kids better leaders, better team workers. And again, recognizing that self-worth that comes from inside, and we're all unique.
Yeah, and more compassionate for sure. And it always starts with a paradigm shift on our part. So
Yes.
I agree with that. Let's get back to social media. I think allowing kids to use social media while protecting them from the downside can be really tricky. Do you have any advice for parents how to navigate this?
First of all, is acceptance. As parents, we have to accept that social media is out there. And when my son was in junior high, they stopped having textbooks. Everything was online. And I'm sure that's continues to be true. The first thing, though, is understanding it's out there and how do we work with what is there. We want to have open communication with our kids, and every kid is different. Some kids you could limit screen time, and that's okay. Other kids, you do that, and they'll find every other way to get online and do the searches. Then at that point, if you have a child that's doing that, you start to break down the communication between you and that child. And it begins to create this dynamic where they are learning how to hide things from the parent and not communicate with the parent what they're seeing, what they're looking, what's out there. Or even if they're getting bullied, they may not tell the parent that because they weren't supposed to be on social media. First
To
step, I
that,
would say,
people say you have to have those systems screening your child's activity. Do you agree with that, or you think that's a bit too much?
yes and no. Yes, I tried that too as a parent. I'm sure the systems are much more sophisticated than now, but you know what else is more sophisticated is our kids. They have ways around that. They'll change their usernames. They'll use different devices. I mean, you can do that to protect your child. I'm not saying not to do that, but I don't think it's a replacement for actual communication with your child and open communication. And again, with the comparisons and talking about this stuff, what happens, educating your child and looking at maybe YouTube videos and talking about what happens if you feel like you're being cyberbullied. What do you do? Who do you talk to? How do you handle that? Why is it not a good idea to just keep that quiet? What things can you send over the internet? What things can't you send? What should you say in person or on phone, not in text? Have those open conversations, teaching rather than going in with the idea that, okay, I have to protect them, which we want to do as parents. But if we go in there saying I have to protect them by putting all these rules and regulations around, our kids, when they leave home, which they will, they won't know how to manage that. Here's an example. I grew up riding bicycles freely in my neighborhood. So, we'd go out till dark. That wasn't the same with when my kids were growing up. They rode bicycles up and down our limited street. We had to know where they were. I lived in the city of Seattle proper. It wasn't safe necessarily with loud cars and people we didn't know for them to ride freely as I did as a kid. It shocked me when we took a family vacation to a designed safe vacation type neighborhood where you could just roam the whole area on your own. And we went out for a bike ride as a family, basically no cars on the road. It's a place where, it's like this designed little town, safe as can be. And I remember my son, he might have been 9 years old at the time, kept looking back and saying, which way do I turn? Which way should I go this way? Okay, can I go there? And he was asking all of these questions, even though we said, go anywhere, you can go anywhere. But he had grown up in this environment that was so confined and safe. He knew how to ride the bike. He knew where his bike was. He had access to it. But there were so many limitations that when it came free for him to go, he wasn't sure where he should be and if it was safe, if it was okay to turn. And I think about that when I think about us as parents putting all these rules and safety tips on these devices that our kids are going to have access to very freely without us. And we're missing the piece of actually teaching them how to navigate that, how to turn things off on their own, how to recognize when something's not safe, and how to kind of have conversations with us when something looks not safe and that it's okay. And if they went to a site that they shouldn't have been on, or if they pressed a button that they shouldn't have been on, that they need to talk to us about it, and we'll talk to them and share with them how we can prevent it from happening again.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's much safer this way to do it when they're young and they listen to you rather than wait.
We as parents, as adults, we're the closest adults to them, and they're watching us. And so we could also show them how if we're on our phones all the time, we're looking at stoplights, picking up our phone, the first thing in the morning, we're on our phones. When they're trying to talk to us, we're on our phones. We're watching TV and we're playing crosswords, whatever it is, they're watching us. And so if we're asking our children to do certain things, it's like, I'm going to use the example of smoking. If you're in a family where you don't believe that your children should smoke, well, if you were smoking in front of them and telling them, oh, don't smoke, how far do you think that would carry?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Do you sense a shift towards a more isolated lifestyle, like with remote work, online learning, text-based communication? It seems like technology is pulling us away from traditional social connections and face-to-face interaction. While it's convenient for things like our interview today, do you think that we should accept this as the new normal, or there's value in pushing back against this trend?
Yeah, it's scary. Well, this is a new normal. And even if we, are going back to work, there's still so much more remote contact than there ever was. And the depression rates are higher than ever, especially amongst young people. Unfortunately, the suicide rates are going up, especially among the younger generation and the older generation. I've been talking recently about men and loneliness and men and friendships. And I think about our sons. And when you think about men and the way they make friendships, and I'll point out why this is important as parents, but men don't often create and these friendships that women do. Their friendships come from work or activities. The depression rate amongst them, once they retire, the rate goes higher than that of women. And that's that generation of men. And I think about this generation who doesn't even have that workplace necessary to make friends at, for men, and they're even more isolated. So if we as parents don't teach our young sons how to make friends, that we actually need face-to-face time, and teach them and our daughters too how that works, to put that effort into meeting friends and talk to them about the value. Hey, how did that feel when you guys were together? Didn't that feel great? How was that different than when you two were just texting? Or,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I heard you guys laugh and you guys can't hear each other laughing when you're texting or when you're playing online for that game. You guys are rolling on the floor playing online. And point out those moments, how it's different to have that face-to-face time and the value of that. Because their generation right now, it's teaching them the value that FaceTime is something that we do over our devices.
Yeah, that's right. And what about our more introverted children who may struggle to make new friends? Are there any ways to support them and offer them help to expand their social circle?
Yeah, for introverts, I often would say find activities that you love. What activities do your kids love? And maybe it's pottery painting or it's one-on-one playtime with another friend that makes it easier.
Thinking
And
about the
for
boys playing games in front of the computer,
Yeah, well,
usually.
yeah, well, the boys that are more introverted, they play games in front of the computer, and for them, it takes a little bit more to get them out. But doing things like, okay, here's a break, and maybe, you guys walk around the block or whatever it is. The good thing is there doesn't seem to be a correlation between loneliness and depression with introvert or extrovert. The
Mhm.
introverts may have a smaller circle of friends and get their happiness and don't feel disconnected and don't feel lonely from a smaller group. Extroverts may get that same feeling from a larger group and maybe less intimate relationships. But the good news is there's not a correlation between being introverted and extroverted and loneliness and depression as far as the research that I've looked at. So you
That's
just,
good to hear.
yeah, and I think normalize introversion. Unfortunately, too, in schools, the kids that are the loudest, they're also looked at sometimes as the smartest. That's just because they talk so much. And so at home, too, we could talk about how do you like to share your ideas and point out that there are different ways to share ideas, and being extrovert does not make you smarter necessarily. It makes you louder and heard more, but you can also have a voice when you're introverted, and maybe it's through writing.
That's true. And as a friendship expert, would you tell us what do you believe constitutes a healthy understanding of friendship? I
Mhm.
recently listened to an episode of Mel Robbins on
Mhm.
her podcast where she suggested that not all friendships are destined to last forever,
Mhm.
and yet each serves a purpose in our life. What's your take on that?
I 100% believe it. I always say everyone we meet is our teacher and our student. And the Webster definition of friendship is simply mutual admiration for another person. And
Mhm.
I think that's important to recognize, because unfortunately, I fear that we often put too much pressure on what a friend needs to be. And we put this great pressure that a friend needs to show up for us at any time. A friend needs to always have our back. A friend needs to drop everything if we call. And when we put all these pressures, and granted, we do have those friends, we have that tight friend, but not everyone has to be that level of friend. And we need to remember that, because otherwise we put too much pressure on ourselves to be friends. And it makes it really hard then to open ourselves up to new friendships if we have such a high bar for what a friend should be. So understanding that having mutual admiration is the Webster definition makes it simple. So it makes it then easy for me to go, oh, okay, well, I admire this person. This looks like a friend. And every friend, like you mentioned, and this is another thing for parents too, every friend isn't meant to be in your life forever. In fact, friendships change, especially as you get older, about every 7 years. It's just those few friends that stay, the long haul. And that's okay, because we all grow at different rates. We're all there to learn different things, and our lifestyles change. And we put so much emphasis as parents to make friendships. We spend so countless hours creating these great play dates and driving forever to make sure
We
our kids
do.
have have these wonderful, social experiences, which is fabulous. But what we don't do is teach our kids that's okay to end friendships, how to end friendships, and that we in our own lives have ended friendships. And if we teach our kids that, they won't feel the guilt that comes sometimes with ending a friendship. They hopefully would be able to end friendships where it feels good to them, like they feel that they did in the most respectful way that aligns with their beliefs and values. So I do think it's very important for parents to share with their kids when their own friendships, you don't have to share the details, but that it's okay that friendships parted and friendships ended. And sometimes those friendships come back together. And other times you just look and go, okay, it makes sense that that person was in my life at that time. And I'm thankful that they were there. But now, it makes sense for both of us to continue our journeys in different directions.
I love that. And they will be more prepared when they're on the other side, when they're the ones who are betrayed, and when they're hurt even more because it's out there in public thanks to social media. And this way, we can also teach them some healthy coping mechanisms to deal with these rough patches, right?
Exactly. And then that also that goes back to that foundation that we hopefully are able to create and cultivate in our kids of self-worth, and even their friendship losses. Those external things don't affect your self-worth. On that note, when I did that 50 states travel, there was a woman I met, and I met a stranger in every state. There's a woman I met in West Virginia, and she's a young Black, I say young because I'm in my 50s, but she's in her 30s. So a young Black woman. Her family was the only Black family in her town. And I asked her, I said, hey, was that difficult, standing out like that as the only Black family in a southern town, small town? And she proudly said, no, it wasn't, because I always knew my self-worth. And yeah, and she said, so she goes, it didn't matter if people liked me or didn't like me or what they said. And then she kind of laughed. She said they would get to know me and everyone loved me. And I'm sure that was true after meeting her. But she said, my mom taught me my self-worth, and it had nothing to do with my skin color. And when we circle back, right? Let's circle back to those healthy comparisons and talking about who we admire and wow, what makes them unique? What makes that artist that you love, that you keep playing that song over and over again? Why? What makes that person unique? What makes that person in your class unique, that people like that person, that child? Oh, they're very nice. They're nice to everyone, whatever it is, right? And we start pointing out these uniquenesses, celebrating our kids' unique strengths, which may not give them the A's in class or be celebrated, on a regular basis because it's not a marker. But as we help our kids identify their value and internalize their self-worth, and talk about our family histories, their identity, all of that, because we get so busy trying to get them kept up in school, sports, just trying to get through the day. Taking that time to do those kind of things. I've been cleaning my house lately because I'm moving, and I had my parents' items, and my dad used to write me poems. And so I'm reading them now as a adult. He died when I was 25 years ago, so a long time. I was very close to him. And he used to write me poems. And now I'm reading them at my age now. And there's been so many times I wished he was still here to guide me as a parent. He died before I had kids. And I'm reading these poems, and I'm realizing, wow, he was giving me parent advice. These are kind of cute poems, but he was telling me how special I was. He was pointing out my unique traits. And I realized what he was doing now, where I got my self-worth from. And so it was these kind of little things that was a part of our life that happened. And even reading, I wasn't as close to my mom, but even reading through some of her old things and birthday cards, she kept birthday cards she gave me, which is kind of funny. But now reading through them and seeing that relationship, I can see her in where her heart was with me. That is what we need to take a break and time for.
Yeah, just slow down, because this is what's important. Okay, Shari, tell us about your friendship book series. Although geared toward adults, understanding our own friendships is crucial in guiding our children, as you said.
Yeah, so the 3 friendship books I wrote are really journals, and they're just lessons I've learned from my own girlfriends. I kind of accidentally became a writer after age 50. Between my 49th and 50th birthday, I sat down with 50 women in my life to tell them what I learned from them. With the idea, as you mentioned, that people come into our lives at different times, maybe for lessons, and I think you learn something from everyone. So I accidentally became a writer there. It was a journal, and during COVID, when my state was shut down, I wrote a second book. This time I met with women on Zoom, asking them what their message was. That became their message. And the third one came about when my publisher said, you have a series. And I thought, why can't I have a series with 2 books? I need 3. So they are 3 journaling books, all with little snippets from women in my life. And this last book that'll come out February 25 is more of a personal journey through the US where I met with 50 different women of all ages, races, political beliefs, economic levels, education levels. And I thought I was sharing meals with 50 strangers, and they turned out to be my 50 teachers. So that's that I'm looking forward to sharing that story. That's
That
a very
sounds
personal one.
amazing. Amazing. Would you also like to tell people where they can further connect with you? Tell us about your podcast.
Sure. I'm on social media at, it's a big word, it's 3 words, and imperfectly perfect life. I guess 4 words, and imperfectly perfect life. Or you could always look me up by name, which is Shari, Shari, and Leid, Leid.
Thanks for tuning in and letting me be a part of your day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated on our latest episodes. And if you found today's conversation on social comparisons to be interesting and valuable, please share it with a friend who might benefit from hearing it. Your support means the world.